Who here could get excited about the idea of writing the next subtle art of not giving a fuck? What about learning in simple terms why we learn through stories more easily than pure facts? And would you like to learn how to turn your lived experience, your expertise, into a book that shifts minds, markets, and changes lives for the better? Hi, my name is Rose. I'm founder of Voice to Page, and this is Intro to Story Psychology. You could be anywhere right now, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying the moonlight, out with friends, relaxing, but instead you're here, investing in yourself, which tells me that you, like me, are dedicated to learning a craft skill that can change people's lives. Take a moment to pat yourself on the back, because most people just scrolled straight past because they don't have the drive we do. Now, something really interesting happens to the brain when we listen to a story and conjure up images. When you hear a fact, your conscious brain, it acts like a bouncer. It decides if this fact deserves to come into the bar of your brain and make changes. But present that bouncer with a pretty dress or a nice picture, and it allows it to go straight on through to subconscious. Not only that, when we are picturing something, it lights up the same part of the brain that lights up when we are doing something. Now, our experiences shape our identity. And when you light up this part of the brain that says, hey, I am doing this thing, you can shape somebody's identity. You can change the way they think. The brain is a physical structure. It's not just this nebulous idea, and this lighting up of the brain when we're thinking of pictures, that has been mapped. When you're experiencing a story, whether it's reading, whether it's listening, whether it's watching, your brain interprets it as something I am doing. Story then becomes evidence that a different way of living is possible. That's powerful, isn't it? So you can see that information delivered as story can have an enormous impact, but you can't scale confusion. You do still have to organize this information in the right way. So today we are going to cover 3 main parts. Part 1 is what story does to your brain. Part 2 is the science of why this works. And part 3 is a tool you can use immediately to implement into your writing. You can use today and forever. Sound good? Would you like all of that? And would you like it in under an hour? Now, around about now, you're probably thinking, where do I get the authority to talk about this stuff? So I'll tell you a little bit about me. In 2020, my life fell apart just like everybody else's. And I escaped through story. When I ran out of stories to read, I started writing. Now, there are 2 things that you need to know about me. One is that I learned through doing. So I didn't go to uni and learn about the idea of writing before actually putting pen to paper. I just started writing. And 6 months later, I had a 120,000 word book. Like, we are talking about like real escapism there. That was my day in, day out. And the second thing you need to know about me is that I don't like doing things badly. So I sent my manuscript off to a professional editor, and she sent back a detailed report of the things that my writing needed to get up to scratch. That was when I started learning. I took her exact feedback and learnt about every single thing that she said that I needed to know. I read books, I did courses online, and the internet is fantastic. If you have the right direction, you can learn anything. I wrote 6 fantasy books before moving on to nonfiction, and then applied the same learning method there. But I took it a step further because I wanted to know why books like Atomic Habits and The 5-Second Rule and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People changed minds. I wanted to know why they were so popular. So I started looking into the psychology around that. I have the authority to speak to you about this because I became a professional author without going to university. When I did go back to uni, I still hadn't learned anything 2 years later that I hadn't already taught myself, so I dropped out. And I continued my university. I hone in on what's relevant. I hone in on what's usable. I practice that craft, and then I teach it to you. Meaning that I have the secret sauce that is going to speak straight to the subconscious of your reader's brain. I'm going to teach you why it works. I'm going to teach you what to do, and I'm going to teach you how to apply it. But so that you can get the most out of this workshop, let's put 3 agreements in place. Agreement number 1. A closed mind is like a closed door. Nothing is coming in and you're not going anywhere. So can we agree to keep an open mind? Agreement number 2. If I give you my full attention, can you give me your full attention? Distractions down, phones down. We're in this together for the next half an hour, okay? And number 3, if you're not having fun, you're probably bored. If you're bored, you're not learning anything. So for the duration of this workshop, can we agree to have fun? Yes? We can? Put your hands up in the air and shake them around because we're about to get started. I love this stuff. Thanks for being here. Part 1. What story does to the brain? The first thing that you need to know, you can write this down. Facts don't change people. Stories do. Humans learned through story way before lectures and books. Picture a campfire crackling. The community surrounding the fire has their full attention on Grok, who is telling the story of a hunt that went badly. The horror of it, the tragedy of it. Everybody is gasping, they are feeling, and they are not going to make that same mistake. What we need to pay attention to here is the brain doesn't, or it rarely stores neural data like in a filing cabinet. It files its facts inside stories, inside the relevant thing. Think about, we all know that when chicken's been in your fridge for a couple of days, you probably shouldn't eat it. But when your housemate comes and tells you about the 24 hours that they were laid out, going at both ends because they didn't observe the chicken rule, then you pay attention. Their recounting of this visceral experience leaves you feeling sick because you're experiencing this story along with them, and you don't want that. You don't want that. The reality is that we don't live in the world. We live in our nervous system. Our peripheral nervous system, and then our central nervous system, brain, which processes all of the data that comes up. And when a fact that hasn't come by way of your messaging system comes across the brain, the conscious brain, your bouncer brain asks, does this fit the story I already believe? Does this match my identity and my values? And does it feel true? If the answer is yes, it is accepted. If the answer is no, it is rejected. Those are the facts that go in one ear and out the other, or in one eye and out the other. Furthering on from that, how you frame a fact is way more important than the actual fact itself. Stats of salmonella versus visceral recounting of gastro. And historically, look at the way that information is taught. Prophets always teach through stories. We teach kids about values and value systems through fables and through storybooks. Even our language is filled to the brink with metaphor. We're creating images constantly. We're creating stories constantly. This is just about recognizing that and harnessing it and putting structure around it so that you can tailor the effect that you're having. There we go, that's it. Let's go back to uni. Picture the textbooks. They are big, they are dense, the words are about this big, and unless you're really interested in the content, the economics is I mean, I can picture the textbook, but I cannot remember what was written in it. Even at the time, if I didn't highlight it, it didn't go through. I can understand it, but it hasn't gone through to my long-term memory. I do remember the case studies. They stuck because it was following a human journey of whether this stuff actually worked or not. Look at How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book it's all fact, but it is also all story. Every single point that Dale Carnegie, my pen. Every single point that Dale Carnegie brings up in the original and in the rewrite has case studies. And in each of these case studies, their lives and businesses changed in a meaningful and positive way. So we get to the end of that remembering what they did much more easily than if it had just been a list of stuff to do. And really, that's why human books are still selling when anybody can get anything from AI anywhere. It's that people are looking for social proof from humans. Sprout recently did a study that's showing that the younger generation is actually going to social media before search engines. So they're looking up in TikTok and Instagram how to XYZ and looking for real accounts with, the less edited side of videos so that it seems less AI-like to get their information and advice from people. Anyway, I digress, but it's still stories. That which actually does lead to my next point. In nonfiction, we only trust teachers that have been through what we've been through. If you're sitting with a grief counselor who's never actually lost somebody and telling you that you just have to accept and move on, you're sitting there wanting to be swallowed by the couch because all you want to know is from someone that has already been through it, that someday it's going to hurt less. This is why when you are talking about story, especially if my nonfiction is out there, it's important that you only speak about what you've already been through. Stories that you actually have the experience and expertise to tell. Essentially, the voice-to-page method is you find the universal problem that you've lived through that a whole bunch of other people are experiencing as well. You talk about your unique solution, the way that you got from one side of that problem to the other side of the problem. You tell it in language that is simple enough for a fifth grader to understand, because in the attention age that we live, the memory span of a goldfish is enviable. Things need to be simple. If you don't take your reader by the hand and lead them through your point, they're wandering off, they're putting down your book and they're not finishing. So, universal problem, unique expression of solution, simple language, and the correct story, imagery, and structure, and that is your brand. That is how you can change people's life for the better. And my fiction writers out there, this is what your hero needs to have. Your hero moves through this, your reader moves through this. That is impact, that is change, that is power. We'll go into some ethics later, but stuff is powerful. What have you learned so far? Facts don't change people, stories do. The science of why this works. So the first psychoanalyst that we're going to talk about today is Carl Jung. And he proposed that there is a deep, instinctive level of consciousness called the collective unconscious that's universal. Our consciousness, the cultures we live in, the time that we live in, this is sort of splashing around on the surface, but underneath there is this shared layer, this deep ocean layer. And within this deep layer, there are certain creatures that are swimming around that are common for the entirety of humanity, and those are the archetypes. Now, these archetypes show up in stories that have been told and myths that have been told cross culture, cross the eons. Think our typical hero's journey. The reason why these stories show up across the time, across the globe, in this collective unconsciousness, is because it's the way that we process things. It's the way that we grow. It's the way that we view challenges and move through them. Do you see why this is so powerful? Because there is this deep, instinctive layer of human consciousness that's been proven to have been connected in this way by the myths that have been recorded across the eons, and we can tap into that. And when you tap into that, when you're telling a story in a way that the human psyche already wants to respond and move through things, it just makes it so much easier. You're speaking its language. Let's look at the hero's journey. So we have three sort of main sections within that: separation, initiation, and return. The hero is in their hometown and there is a problem. There is a problem with the world and there is also a problem with the hero. Then we have initiation, leaves the town, goes through a bunch of different trials. In fantasy, that's dragons. In the day-to-day, that's leaving home, let's go like your nemesis at college, and you change, essentially. You change, and you change in a way internally. That means that you can face your universal problems and then return successful and vanquish the demons. Now, these stories resonate with us because they mirror how we change. Readers recognize them instinctively, and once you start getting to the habit of putting your thoughts down onto the page, your thoughts will also mirror these processes. But if I map them out for you, then it's like sliding on a pair of shoes that have already been worn in instead of having to wear them in yourself. You're still, using them the same way, except one comes with blisters. The good news is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Myths, legends, and any keynote that you've actually enjoyed, they all follow the archetypes you already know. Now let's look at three main inner journeys. Now, I talk about Carl Jung a lot because I'm obsessed with the work that he's done. I think it's fantastic. But the thing is, he was a psychoanalyst, not a storyteller. I've studied his works and I've studied the works of a few other people, and I've extrapolated what's relevant to authors, what's relevant to you. I mean, come on, it's a literal blueprint of the human psyche. It's too good an opportunity to pass up. But you're not going to find what I'm about to tell you if you just Google archetypes. What you'll probably get is a list of character archetypes or an essay on individuation. Now, I dive into character archetypes in depth in my course, but this is just an intro to story psychology. There isn't the time and space for it here. And here is an overview of three of the main journeys that you or your hero can take. Now, when I talk about these structures, this is not the only structure that your book needs. There are different plot beats that work for different genres, and those are the progression that sort of each chapter needs to take that has already been mapped extensively by other brilliant story crafters, and we're not going over it in this workshop. What I'm talking about is the overall arc that your story is going to take, the overall journey that your reader is going to go on. Like the overall, if you know anything about the hero's journey, you do have, I think it's like 12 steps. But in the main, it goes from separation, initiation, and return. And I've mapped out three main ones to get into it. So first is individuation. That's our hero's journey. Fiction, you're looking at The Lion King. Non-fiction, you're looking at leaving current situation with a big problem that you have, bunch of tests, and then you return victorious. The tension within these novels is about identity and about purpose, and the resolution is like self-authored authority afterwards. Journey number 2 is creation. Chaos, moving through order, and then renewal. And this is where a lot of your teachable skill novels like How to Win Friends and Influence People, Atomic Habits, it's the method that I've used for my book on writing. You start with a bunch of mess, then you put in order, that is your structure, that is your method, and then renewal at the end, problem is solved. Marie Kondo does this really well on Netflix as well. She goes in, there is a mess. Her structure is worked through, and then there is peace and cleanliness at the end. Your main tension points here are overwhelm and burnout. And the resolution is structure and clarity. And the third is integration. First we have ego, and then we have shadow, and then we have self. Brené Brown does this really well. You know, she talks about armor, that is the ego, and then confronting the shadow, the shame that's around that. And then when you are able to sort of meet and bring confidence within self, then you have a much better life. That is a gross oversimplification of some brilliant work. In a fiction sense, we can look at Scrooge. He was very high, very mighty, this very like polished persona, very like hard ego. Then he meets his past, his present, and his future, his actual shadows, and then he changes, and then he, you know, becomes more integrated with his sense of self. And that's the change in the end. The tension in that really is the persona that you're upholding versus the truth. These two getting all mixed together and then coming out with peace at the end. And this is where a lot of memoirs live. And then we have our three overarching journeys of individuation and creation and integration. But what about the pictures? I can't remember if I've talked about George Lakoff yet, but he is a psycholinguist that has written some phenomenal books on framing and metaphor and the way that we process words and pictures and language. A lot of what I'm about to talk about comes from metaphors we live by, and don't think of the elephant. It is dense, but it is gold. Once again, he's not writing about stories, he's writing about science, but I'm extrapolating for you. So you get the goss here. Goss? So you get the goods here. So it's from his work that we know when we listen to story and picture story, it lights up the part of the brain that's the doing. Now let's go to tie this in with Jung. Jung said that the unconscious speaks in pictures. You know, we dream in images because the primal part of the brain understands visuals, not words. You know, we had visuals way before language. Jung also posited that everything in your dream is actually an aspect of yourself. Your subconscious is trying to give you messages, usually when the person who you think you are is not lining up with what you're actually doing. So it's good to pay attention, but a little bit less relevant. The relevant part is that this is a conversation. And if the unconscious speaks to us through pictures, we can speak back to it through pictures. Remember, visual imagery activates the same neural machinery used to interpret your reality. So we have that conversation back. We take the picture, we change the picture. You change the picture, you change the meaning. So you elicit a picture in your reader's mind and you reshape it. The unconscious updates that pattern. You're probably over there being like, that's a lot of emphasis on something that doesn't really have a punchline. We're going to get to the punchline, but first we need to have a little talk about Freud. There is a lot about Freud that is, I think, not helpful, but his initial work is fantastic. You know, before he discovered Coke. He was the one that theorized that we create rules that get us stuck in a defense mechanism. You know, these protective mechanisms are the ones that take us away from pain. Where it's not helpful is if brain says, we have uncomfortable feeling, we take cigarette because this makes uncomfortable feeling go away. This defense mechanism takes us away from pain, but unconscious doesn't always know what's best for us. It's just very pain averse. For example, when you freeze in a flight, your defense is doing its job. It's avoiding a feeling. It's avoiding a conflict. You know, if your boss or somebody yells at you when you then go out drinking to avoid the feeling, you're avoiding your internal conflict. And there will always be a phrase or a feeling that's attached to this discomfort. Those are our limiting beliefs. So when you were at your worst, what was the conversation that you were having with yourself? What was the limiting beliefs that you were telling yourself? And the more honest you are, the better your book is going to be, because you may be unique, but your problems are universal. Your limiting beliefs are also universal. Your shame is also universal. And whatever subroutine your brain latched onto in the name of protection and has been sabotaging you ever since will be throttling somebody else's efforts as well. You name it, you take its power away. The thing is that nobody picks up a book to read about you. They pick up your books so that they can learn how to move through problems like you, or to experience the life that you've had. But that's not about you. That is about them. And in part 3, I'm going to tie all of these things together. Part 3, the tool you can use now, the tool you can use forever, the thing that you have come to this workshop for, because you know that the brain speaks in pictures. And you know that we have this way of processing and moving through problems that has been, my pen. That has been synonymous with humankind across the eons. You know that people are interested in your story, and you know that we can change the way that they see things and the way that they process the world by speaking in pictures. Do you see what I'm getting here? Do you see what I'm getting at here? Let me give you the steps. So, step 1, take your universal problem. Step 2, find your limiting belief that is attached around the universal problem. Step 3, choose the archetypal journey that you're going to move through to get from one side of the problem to the other. And now, this is how you're going to build your chapter. Let's go with a small body of writing first. You want a scene that's showing your universal problem. So you want your scene that's showing some way this problem is stuffing up your life. You want to use sensory detail, what you can see, what you can touch, what you can smell. This is what's going to conjure up those images in the brain. And remember, the more vulnerable you are, the more honest you are, the more marketable you are. And it's not because people are going to be so appreciative of how brave you were. But if you admit something that you were actually really ashamed of, and somebody else also feels that shame, they aren't going to feel alone anymore. So you've built your scene. Now you're going to name that limiting belief and attach another image to it. This can be vines, this can be a broken down car, this can be any picture. And then what you're going to do is you're going to change that picture. So when you're writing something attached to a limiting belief, you want it to be a picture that's sort of dilapidated, or it's actually physically getting in your way. So when you change the picture, you are moving this thing out of the way. You are changing the limiting belief, which is kind of awful, into something that is better. Once you change the image into something better, put a new belief in its place. because the brain's going to be looking for some other way to protect you. And if you don't replace it with something better, then it'll just go back to what was. And then you change your scene and show how the universal problem is now less problematic. So we have universal problem, pictures, limiting belief, pictures, change limiting belief, pictures, change universal problem, pictures. I'm going to attach an example for you. I'm going to read that example out for you because you are lucky. And for my fiction writers, I'm going to attach the 10,000 word reader magnet that I use for my fantasy series. It's free for you. I use all of this in that magnet. And now that you've gone through this, you should be able to pick up, this is the limiting beliefs. This is how it's affecting her life. This is how her internal monologue is doing this. These are the pictures. And then you'll see the way that I've changed that throughout it so that readers get to the end of my novella feeling, better about themselves. It's very fun. It's very sneaky. And that's where we need to talk about the ethics portion, because story psychology is powerful. You want to make sure that in your non-fiction books, so in your method books and in your memoirs, you're talking about experiences that you actually went through, because that's where your expertise lives. And in fiction books and non-fiction, actually, if you bring your reader into a dark place, respect their nervous system and lead them back out so that your reader leaves empowered. I have beef with dark romantasy and dark fantasy and dark romance at the moment, because you've got a lot of authors that are throwing a ton of trauma and imagery down onto the page and not leading readers back out to it, which that then just perpetuates problems in their lives. But you'll see me ranting about that on social media. The following example has a ton of universal problems, imagery, character archetype, as well as story archetype and limiting beliefs. I've added it as a PDF so you can read it if you don't want to listen, so that you can highlight things, so that you can pick it apart and see what's possible when the right framework is used. Now, not every chapter is going to look like this. You just weave it into the important places. And for my fiction students, I'll also add the reader magnet that I was talking about. The one that I use for my fantasy romance series. It's filled with what I've spoken about today. And I'm just gonna read this out from the page. There it is, a cursor, a line on the page, and it's winking at you. It's sitting underneath the heading, promising and expectant all at once, the bitch. You know the information you want to deliver, or you know the outline of it, but there's pressure. It's not just information you're providing. It has to be readable. It has to be personable. It has to have the you element that readers will relate to. The office chair underneath you creaks, asking why you haven't gone to bed yet. When the pressure becomes too much, you look down the page to the interwoven circle icon sitting on your taskbar. ChatGPT. It would be so easy. It doesn't matter that you know you're a creator who has already made so much already. It doesn't matter that you know your words are good, because are they really good enough? Are you really smart enough to write a book that people will want to read? One well-worded prompt would spill reams of information onto the page. One well-worded prompt would destroy that mocking, winking cursor. One well-worded prompt would destroy all authenticity. You're sitting in a crossroad of technology. One path, the job gets done faster and smoother, which feels good. The other path, you can roll down on your office chair, is way bumpier and vulnerable and leads to a book that will sell more, which will feel better. But you're thinking, what if I'm the only person on earth that this book writing method won't work with? What if I'm actually boring and can't change anybody's life for the better? What if nobody likes it, or me, or buys it? The words are a strangling vine, creeping up your office chair to wrap around your hands, your throat, to wind through the passageways of your mind, leaving leaves rustling on a breeze that says, you'll never be good enough. You'll stay financially unstable forever. The pressure of performing sits heavy in your bound fingertips as words swell in half-formed sentences faster and faster. Then you take a breath and huff it out, silencing the wind. You don't need the bot. You have a system that will help people, help others. The thought of shining, you take a deep breath and huff it out, silencing the wind. You don't need the bot. You have a system that will help people, help others. The thought of shining a light into someone else's dark night pierces the vines, burns them and turns them to dust, because you know your story matters. You write the first word. It's all going to be okay. You put that first word down. You pushed the keys and wrote it. You've done it once. You can do it again. A new milestone is achieved. You are a writer. We have now reached the end of Intro to Story Psychology. Did you learn something new? Did you have fun while you were doing it? Do you have tools that you're now excited to try out? Now, this was a condensed version of what I offer in my full course. This is actually a great little taster, because if you've enjoyed what we've done here, then you will enjoy everything else that I've created. You know, the whole story psychology element in my course covers a few hours. We dive into more archetypes. We dive into character archetypes and how you can apply that to both fiction and non-fiction characters and yourself. Goes into way more depth about how to shift limiting beliefs and about how to find what your limiting beliefs actually are. And it covers exactly how to craft scenes like the ones that I read out. You would have noticed that there was a lot more in there than what we covered today. And it might have felt a little bit overwhelming because I went through how to, sketch things out. And what I gave you is like a full in-depth picture of movement and craft. Now, not every chapter looks like this. The important ones do. And they fit in certain places within the story structure. Anyway, I digress. I am constantly getting distracted about the things that I'm passionate about. You now understand how the brain receives story. 3 main inner journeys, how to identify unconscious rules, and how to reshape them with archetypes and images. You have a blueprint there, and that's not just for writing, that's for leading.